Dr. Waddell Brooks, Sr., your host, and this is Community Forum. This evening, we're talking with Dr. Thomas Rudd, the Lake County coroner, and this is, ladies and gentlemen, is an evening with Lake County coroner. Good evening, Dr. Rudd.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's been a long time since I've been on your show.
Yeah, very good. We seen you quite a bit at the North Chicago City Council, and but I thought it would be exemplary of you to take time from your busy schedule to speak to Lake County. Well, I say Lake County, but the Comcast family is approximately 100,000 people. Now, when you're on the radio show, you're talking to potentially 800,000 people to Lake County. But you have a great message, and I'd like for you to share it with us by telling our listening audience a little bit about your personal and professional background.
Okay. Well, I am by trade, for want of better terms, a pathologist. Now, that means that I have a medical degree.
Okay.
And I went to the University of Illinois College of Medicine and graduated in a year I won't mention.
Okay.
And after that, after you go to medical school, you are a full-fledged doctor. Most people don't realize that. You can go and practice medicine. For instance, you get out of medical school and you take your third part of your national boards, and by definition, you are a physician and surgeon, and you get a license from the state of Illinois stating that. So you can go out and do whatever you want. However, most people that leave medical school do not have an extensive amount of experience, and so they need to go into residency. So I decided to pick pathology as a residency because it is a field of medicine in which is the basis of other areas of medicine. It's how the body works, or actually how the body sometimes shuts down. So that required 4 years of training. The 2 years you spend in tissue analysis, actual organs that you study.
Okay.
And then there's 2 years spent in what they call clinical pathology, which is basically body fluids, blood, serum, joint fluid, eye fluid, whatever fluids there are in the body, you study that in the analytic composition of those fluids and making diagnoses. After I left there was an area of medicine that was up and coming. It was called nuclear medicine, where we used radioisotopes to diagnose various illnesses in various organs. Some of these isotopes would go to specific organs, and then you could take an X-ray image of these organs because the isotope emitted rays that were similar to X-rays, and you'd make pictures out of them. So I spent a total of about 5 years postgraduate training. And I was living in Chicago at the time. I was very lucky to find my first job right out of residency in Highland Park Hospital. I had a group up there called Dean Hoffman and Clark, which no longer exists as that medical group, but they were, I'm bragging here, one of the premier pathology groups in Chicago. And even though I worked at Highland Park mainly, we also had Lake Forest Hospital. So we had both hospitals running the labs. And I worked there from 79 to about 94. And I decided to move on because it was getting to be difficult to work, the schedule I had, being on call quite often with nuclear medicine. So I decided to go into commercial lab. So I worked with a commercial lab for about 15 years. And then as I hit my early 60s, my mother was ill, and I decided to retire and take care of her for the end of her life. And I did such a good job, Dr. Brooks, she lasted 4 years. So I'm proud of that, actually. My brother and I both did that. And then during the time I was taking care of her, a lot of things started happening in Lake County. We had some problems in the coroner's office with the physician that was running it. And then we had problems with law enforcement that ran it. And I had been contacted by the Democrats prior to this other doctor running, and they asked me to run, and I decided not to because I was enjoying what I was doing. So I looked at it again while I was taking care of my mother, and I knew she was going to pass. And it was just a matter of time. So I thought, you know, why don't I run for this office? I'm a pathologist. This office deals with pathology. I think I will run. So I called up various people in the Democratic Party, and I said, you know, I'm willing to do this. And lo and behold, the physician that was in there actually had to resign. So before I even got a chance to run, I was interviewed for the position. And I was shocked that they didn't take me. Okay, absolutely shocked. I figured I did a great presentation, I thought, and they decided to pick somebody from law enforcement that they knew. And quite honestly, that made me upset. And I really decided, you know, I'm going to run for this office. I think they picked the wrong person. And so I did it on my own because, don't forget, the person they put in was a Democrat. And the party, once somebody is put in, they support that individual. And I'm not saying that's wrong. Okay, so I had no support until I met people in the community, especially North Chicago and Waukegan. And so it was a ground roots run, okay? And I enjoyed it quite a bit, and turned out that I won.
You know, Dr. Rudd, the qualifications for that office, is it required that you be a doctor to run the office?
Unfortunately not. All a coroner has to have is a high school education and no conviction of a felony.
Okay.
He can commit as many misdemeanors as he wants, but he can't commit a felony. Now, let's discuss why we have the coroner system.
Okay.
Okay, it was a system that arose many years ago in England, some around the 1300s or 1400s, and it based on a tax. Politicians always want to tax you.
Okay.
So the king was running out of money in England. So he thought of a great idea. Why don't we tax every death?
Oh.
And so, back then, in the 1300s, the coin, or the major coin, was called a crown. So the king would send out a man to collect that crown. So the name comes from Latin for crown is corona, coroner.
Okay.
So technically the name of the name is the collection of a coin or a crown, a British crown. So that's how we got corona or coroner.
Okay.
So this was just a basic individual who was a tax collector, really, more than anything else. So obviously our country comes from England. Okay, most of the settlers on the eastern coast of the United States were under the British Crown until we separated in the 1770s, and we took on their judicial system. So we kept the idea of coroner, except we no longer were collecting money. It was just a publication of the notice of a death. But as it developed over the next couple hundred years, it became very important to rule out homicide. Okay, back then you could commit murders and most likely get away with it because it was, you know, not that much of a law enforcement setup. I mean, if you're out in the boonies and the farms, you certainly could get away with things. So the system actually developed to make sure there was no murders. Okay, so that's how the coroner got started, and that's how, or continued, and that's what they held inquests to find out if this death was in fact natural or not. Okay. As it became more detailed, like around the turn of the 20th century, they realized that that somebody who studied medicine was necessary in determining the cause of death. Okay, because it became more difficult in analyzing murders. Murders became more sophisticated with poisons, et cetera, or staging of murders, so it looks like an accident. So you needed a physician who was trained in the science of forensic pathology. So around the turn of the century, physicians were looking to go into it. But the political nature of the office was so corrupt around the turn of the century that a lot of physicians shied away. And so the coroner system continued. Now here's the problem. There are 2,000 counties in the United States.
Okay.
There are only 450 physicians that practice forensic pathology. So only 1 out of 4 counties can get a physician who does that. That leaves 3/4 of the counties without the ability to hire a board-certified forensic pathologist. So we need some system that does document deaths. So the coroner system has stayed in effect because I was fairly egalitarian. I had my nose. I looked down on the coroner system until I went to a course that is required for everybody who is a coroner in the state of Illinois, and I found out there are counties that are so sparsely populated. Some of them don't even have hospitals. So there's no way you're going to be able to attract a forensic pathologist to work there because he won't have enough to do. Okay. On top of not being able to be paid. So we still need a coroner system, but once we get into counties that have 800,000 people, 1 million people, you really do need a forensic or at least a pathologist that runs the office, because you're going to have a lot more autopsies than you would in a very small, sparsely populated county. Okay, so that's why a physician should be in the position of a coroner system, especially a pathologist. That does not mean that I can do autopsies. I still have to get a board-certified forensic pathologist to do the autopsy, because by law, a coroner doesn't have to be a physician. If he happens to be a physician, that's okay, but he still can't cut, because the law says that position can't cut. That's to protect the public from somebody who is, other than a doctor, thinking, well, I can do this.
Lawsuits and so
Correct.
forth.
Correct.
This type of thing. You know. And I noticed you mentioned on the Lake County itself, we can speak of Lake County, the history of Lake County has not had a medical examiner as coroner.
No. In fact, they've never had a pathologist. I'm the first pathologist that heads up the coroner system.
Oh.
We've had we've had an emergency room physician run it, but most of the people that ran it were hairdressers, undertakers, and I think a former sheriff. Okay, I think Mickey Babcock. Maybe before he became sheriff, he was the coroner. I think that was it. So, and I don't know who was before Mickey Babcock. I think it goes even though I'm old, it goes beyond that. Beyond that, I can't remember. So we had various lay people that did it.
Because I would think you need to be knowledgeable.
Well, you know,
the office.
that you're right. You're right. You know, one thing I should say that the coroner is more than just administrative.
Okay.
Okay. There are 2 things you do when you determine death. There is a cause, and then there's a manner. The way the coroner system is set up, the manner of death is done by the coroner. The cause is done by the autopsy pathologist that does it.
Okay.
Okay. Now, causes are are almost too numerous to mention. Heart attack, stroke, et cetera, you know, trauma due to a fall, getting hit by a car. These are all the causes, but there are only 5 manners of death.
Okay.
Okay, and that's what the coroner does, and that's a very powerful thing. Okay, because it means that he decides whether it's a natural death, a homicide, a suicide, an accident, or undetermined. And we had a case, Deer and Hannah, in which the coroner at the time said that he could not determine the manner of death, so he labeled it undetermined.
And when you said he could not determine, But did he call in a pathologist, or did
Yes.
he call him? Okay.
The pathologist came in and did the autopsy and gave him the findings, okay, taser, batoning of the thighs, heroin abuse, or I should say drug abuse. I'm not sure if it was heroin. It probably was more cocaine. Hypertension, sickle cell, etc. So he
Okay.
gave him all the causes, but the manner had to be decided by this layperson who happened to be law enforcement.
Okay.
And he said, oh, it was a collage of everything, so we can't pin it on one or the other. So we'll label it undetermined. And when I first heard that, I was very upset because I knew that it was not undetermined.
So when he said undetermined, then that means it's not criminal, right?
When he says undetermined, what he's saying is that he cannot tell from all the causes given to him
Okay.
what killed that person. I came in and saw the findings, and I said the batoning and the tasering caused certain biochemical changes that were in the blood, which I saw in the review, and that was a homicide as a result. In other words, Darren had a sickle cell, which means that his organs were not functioning. He was a trait. His organs were not functioning even when he was, quote, healthy, like the rest of us.
Okay.
He was at best 50% functional in all his organs. Then you stress him by tasering him and by batoning him, okay, you destroyed his muscles. They called it rhabdomyolysis, just a Latin term, rhabdom meaning muscle dissolving. And when his muscles dissolved, it produces a chemical that gets into the blood and goes to the kidney, and it's exceedingly toxic to the kidney. And it was a miracle that the people at the hospital were able to keep him alive for 7 days. They did such good care of him because the level of that chemical in there was in the tens of thousands, and he should have died almost immediately. But the good care they gave him allowed him to live for at least 7 days. Okay, so you have to have a medical mind to understand the causes. Okay, and that's why when somebody who isn't a physician is looking at these causes, they may not want to say what was the main cause because they may not know, or they may not say because of other reasons. But that's why you need a physician and a pathologist in that position. Okay?
So the coroner at that time made a decision the best of his ability at that time.
I would assume that. I would assume that. Despite the fact that he had a pathologist telling him these are the findings, I don't know what their conversation was. Had I been the pathologist with the findings, I would have said, this is the reason.
Now, does that make that a criminal? Could action be taken?
By nature, or by definition, by the definition of law, homicide does not imply anything that is legal or illegal. It just means the death of one person by another person.
Okay.
For it to determine whether it is criminal, i.e. murder or not, the state's attorney has to enter and decide that.
Okay.
Okay? Law has to decide that. Law enforcement, okay? Specifically the state's attorney. He has to go in there, analyze the situation, look at the findings that the coroner's office gives them, interview the people that were involved in the scene, and determine their motivation and what they did by interviews, and then determine whether or not it was a justified homicide or not justified homicide. And if it wasn't, then by definition that would be murder, and a trial would ensue.
Now, Dr. Ron, there are many other challenges that's faced by a coroner, and you want to tell us about some?
Well, one of which is running the office judiciously and within the budget. Okay, that is a major concern for the citizens of this county. We all know from listening to the news reports of the terrible shape the state of Illinois is, and the city of Chicago. So when I came in, I looked at our budget, which is fairly small. It's about 1.2 to 1.4 million a year. We only have 10 employees. I came in and within the first 10 months cut the overtime budget by 30%.
Wow.
Okay? The absolute numbers are not that great, but the percentage makes me look pretty good.
Right.
But we cut it by 30%, and that's just by making sure that the employees use their time judiciously, giving them a form, so that they can fill out when they leave and when they come back and what they do. So budget's a big thing. In fact, we just got done having our budget approved today by the joint judicial board and the county board, and then the final will be done in November. The other thing that we want to make sure we do in the office is we want to make sure our deputy coroners are trained to the maximum in terms of their abilities. Hopefully we'll get them certified by the American Board of Medical Legal Death Investigators, which will prove to the citizens of this county that our people that work in our office meet national standards. And then hopefully after that, we'll get the lab certified, and after that, we'll have the entire office looked at by the National Association of Medical Examiners and see if they'll certify us. That will guarantee to the public of Lake County, the citizens of Lake County, that we're doing our job, because these certifications are very difficult to get.
So you report to the Lake County Board periodically?
Not directly. The main people we would report to is law and judicial. That subcommittee of Lake County Board is the ones that we're answerable to. So if they want to talk to us about our function, I believe the chairman is Audrey Nixon.
Oh yeah, yes.
And so if she wanted to discuss with us something, she'd call me up and say, would you mind speaking to the law and judicial, which I believe meets monthly. Okay. But as far as answerable to anybody, only to the people, because it's an elected office. So I cannot be removed for anything I do in terms of my decision making, as long as it's not a felony.
Okay, right.
And I don't want to, at my age, don't want to spend any time in jail. So,
you spoke about the Hannah case in the city of North Chicago, but what about the Trayvon Martin case? I was reading on the internet, Mr. Bow.
Yeah, Dr. Bow.
The medical examination in Trayvon case, he was fired.
Yep.
Now, to get fired now, that's
well, this whole case is very worrisome. Very worrisome, because I've always said that the best situation would be a medical examiner, and I campaigned that I would like to convert the office to medical examiner, because you need a physician in charge of this, really, if you can get one. Now let's look at the Trayvon Martin case.
Okay.
There's a young man, 17 years old, went to a grocery store, picked up some Skittles and something to drink. He had a hoodie on, and he was going back, I forget, to a relative's apartment or condo. I think it was a relative that he was visiting. Okay. And another man, a Mr. Zimmerman, who allegedly was on the neighborhood watch, was carrying a gun, saw him, and claimed that he was attacked by him and shot him in the heart. Now, this Dr. Bow is a board-certified forensic pathologist, highly qualified.
Okay.
He works in a medical examiner office. That means these are all physicians certified in forensic medicine that work there. It's not a coroner system. I believe the county is Volusia. I may not be pronouncing it right. It's Volusia. And he did an excellent autopsy. I happened to get a hold of it, and I read it. It was very well done.
Okay.
Now, the shocking thing is, and I can't believe this, and it just happened a couple of months ago, he was fired. And he's now suing. And the reason he was fired is because he says, allegedly, that the prosecutor that was going to try the case against Mr. Zimmerman wanted to throw the case. They wanted to not convict Mr. Zimmerman.
Wow.
Based on the following, and it sounds like outright racism. which is shocking in this day and age. He told Dr. Bao, well, I'll back up. Dr. Bao told the prosecutor, I have evidence that Mr. Zimmerman was on top of Trayvon through the entire incident.
Okay.
Trayvon was never, ever on top of Mr. Zimmerman.
Okay.
And that he shot him point blank and held him down from anywhere from 1 to 10 minutes. That the child was dying while Mr. Zimmerman held him down. And that Dr. Bao said, I can prove it. And the prosecutor said, I don't care what you have. That kid got what he deserved, and I'm not going to let you tell the story.
The prosecutor.
The prosecutor. Now, if the audience out there doesn't believe me, just Google the last name of this physician. It's B-A-O, fired. That's all you have to do. B-A-O-F-I-R-E-D. On Google, push the button, and you'll have 30 pages of stories about this. I hardly knew about this until somebody told me. The only reason I found out is I'm a member of the National Association of Medical Examiners, and we have a website for ourselves where we talk amongst ourselves, and they brought it up. I didn't even hear it on the news, and I'm a news junkie.
Okay.
I didn't hear it. Of all stations, Fox did it first. Now, Dr. Bao has got a gentleman by the name of Willie Gary, who's a very prominent lawyer in Florida, rarely loses. They're suing for $100 million.
$100 million?
$100 million for wrongful termination. Now, why is this important to us in Lake County?
Okay.
So let me explain. Dr. Bao had a contract that was not open-ended. Now, what does that mean to the public? Most people work as, you get hired, and people can fire you for no reason. Open-ended contract means you can only be fired for a reason, a justified reason, i.e. the rules of human resources.
Okay.
Okay. Dr. Bao was not under that. He was on a contract that could be for any reason. And that's what happened. He got up to testify, and remember, he was threatened not to tell the truth.
Okay, by the prosecutor.
By the prosecutor. Now this prosecutor is interviewing him. And if people don't know, you can only answer the question that is asked of you. You cannot go beyond that. Dr. Bao tried. And so the press ridiculed him as not knowing what he's doing. They didn't know the story. Okay, they didn't know the story at the time. So as the case is going on, Dr. Bao's trying to get the evidence out as best as he can without ending up in, having the judge threatening to put him in jail or whatever they do, when you don't answer the question.
Okay.
Okay, and he was trying to get it out, and he couldn't. Okay, well, payback occurred after Mr. Zimmerman was set free. He was found not guilty. They went to him and said, we don't like what you tried to do. We want you to get another job and resign. He said, I'm not resigning. And they fired him. Okay? So the importance of that is that if you're going to have a medical examiner, he cannot be fired for doing the right thing. So you need an open-ended contract, and only can be removed for cause. Not testifying to the truth is not for cause. Okay, that's not for cause. Telling the truth, you should never be fired for telling the truth.
Right.
Okay, so if we ever had a medical examiner in this county, I would insist that the individual has an open-ended contract, only fired for cause. He should not be under the sheriff. He should not be under the state's attorney. He should only be answerable to the Lake County Board. Only they can determine whether or not his actions were justified to be removed or not. But there would be stringent rules, so to speak, as to what actions that would allow them to be removed. An example, Dr. Brooks, is Cook County. Dr. Stein, he used to work at McHenry, and I knew him, founded the Cook County Medical Examiner System.
Okay.
He was hired essentially open-ended. He died in office. The gentleman that succeeded him, Dr. O'Donoghue, had the same thing. Open-ended contract until he himself left. Okay? It's very similar to a Supreme Court justice, except the Supreme Court justice could probably, well, no, a Supreme Court justice commit a felony, he'd go to jail. So it is very similar to a Supreme Court justice. Now, a lot of people don't like to hear that. They say, well, why should he have a job forever? All right, let me explain why. You're making some very tough decisions.
Okay.
Very tough. You need to protect yourself and your family. For instance, if you come in and you have a wife and 3 kids, you got one kid in grade school, another kid in high school, another kid in college, you're not going to want to be fearful of making a decision that maybe offends somebody in the county, law enforcement or otherwise, and that you might bend the truth just so that you don't have to move your family. Now, let me give you an example. People say, well, that couldn't possibly happen. Well, there is a position paper by this group that I belong to, National Association of Medical Examiners.
Okay.
And the statistics on medical examiners and coroners trying to be influenced by others in examining the cause of death is 70% of the respondents.
Wow.
When the National Association interviewed the 450 medical examiners and coroners, they asked, have you ever been twisted or attempted to change your diagnosis? 70% said yes, that they were asked to change their anatomic findings. 70%.
Unbelievable.
This is published. You can go onto the National Association of Medical Examiners website. You can log in. You can actually get into their site and review all these articles. These are position papers meant for not only the physicians but for the public. Read the position papers. There is a position paper on independence, and that's what it's about. Now, what's key to this, which is even more shocking than the 70%, is that 25% were either fired, sued, or both by the county. Okay, in other words, they did not have an open-ended contract.
Okay.
All right, these people had 5-year terms and stuff like that. They were either fired, sued, or both by the county. By the county. Okay, so this is a very difficult job to hold and to do a job that is honest without having to worry about your livelihood. Okay, so I hate to say this, most medical examiners nowadays do have term limits in terms of a contract, okay? And so, you know, if they're not making the right decisions at the end of 5 years, we'll let them go. It's not fair.
Not only knowledge of the position that you hold, but leadership plays a great part in it.
True. One's behavior as a professional should, for want of better terms, trickle down into your office. You know, technically, the coroner's office, as you can see, I wore my badge tonight, is law enforcement. And law enforcement is a very tough job, very difficult. I could not think of choosing a career in law enforcement because of the difficulties they now face. You're not just somebody who upholds the law. You're a psychologist. You're a social worker. You have to know how to disarm tense situations, and I don't necessarily mean just with guns, but you have to know that you have to be a good psychologist to handle this. You yourself have to be mentally healthy. There are many cops that are now committing suicide because of stress.
Okay.
So when I got into office, and since it is law enforcement, I have some law enforcement, the language was a bit blue, okay? And if I was working in a sheriff's department or a police department, I probably could accept it for a little bit for letting out steam. But we have families coming through this office.
Okay.
And my leadership was to say, you know, we can't do this. You never know when it's going to happen. You'll lose your temper. You've got to act professionally. Okay?
Right.
We're dealing with the public, and we're dealing with the public at a time when a loved one dies is one of the toughest things to handle. And the last thing they need to hear is some blue language. So that's one of the things I've tried to institute, that change, so that even though we're law enforcement, we have to act professionally and not use certain language.
Other factors, time, energy, and enthusiasm that a coroner has to have.
That's true too. I mean, I put in long days.
Okay.
I put in. I used to try to get in there right away, but now I'm a little delayed. But I get in about 9, and I'm generally the last one to leave. Generally about 6 or 7. I have the energy because it's it's a lot of fun. And even though I was taking care of my mother for 4 years, I wasn't working. I didn't have to get up real early. And so I've recharged my batteries, and it is a lot of fun. I didn't realize that I would handle it as well as I did. I thought there'd be a learning curve. I'm very lucky that the deputy coroners I have, every person, to a man or woman, are superb. They know their job very well. It's not that they need any extra training or anything in terms of doing the day-by-day job. We do send them for education. So it's been quite enjoyable. Plus, it's fun to be in the community, to go to the North Chicago meetings, to go to other meetings. I'm not the type of person who likes to brag about what I do with the community. You'll never see photo ops of me, but I work with a gentleman named Anthony Drac Brown. And so we work with things like we're sending 200 kids to the not the zoo, the carnival downtown, the circus. Okay, so we collect funds to get 200 kids from North Chicago and Waukegan to go down there. We have Mother's Day breakfasts for single moms as well as other moms. And we also have Father Day events. I think it's a dinner or something.
That's just something you thinking out of the box, something that you.
Well, actually, when I started campaigning, I needed to know where to get literature printed, and of course the magic word around here is McAllister. It's not, not an advertisement, but it could be. And there's a lot of people that work out of that office, one of which is a man by the name of Anthony Drac Brown.
Everybody knows Drac.
Right. And Drac's a character, but he's a good-hearted man. And he helped me in my campaign, but he also told me about the things that he organizes. It's really him that is doing this. I help him in ways I can. And he's a real benefit to this community of North Chicago and South Waukegan. So I do things like that with him. Any events he has, I try to support him.
Great person.
Yeah.
Now, another thing too is very important is that you have to be neutral in your investigations.
Yes, that is the utmost of importance. As well as being knowledgeable first, obviously that would probably be the thing, to be knowledgeable in the field of forensic medicine. But honesty is absolutely necessary right after that. You've got to call the chips as they fall and not worry about who is offended, who doesn't like it, who wants to try to change it. If this is the way it occurs, that's the way we're going to call it. We're not going to back down. We can't be influenced. And I know there's a lot of people that don't like hearing that, but I will be cooperative. I will be collegial with law enforcement. I like working law enforcement. I have relatives who are in law enforcement. I know what it's like to work as law enforcement in terms of listening to my relatives talk about it. I've not done it, but I know family that has, and I know the difficulties. And so the people of Lake County, I'm assuring them that whatever results come out of our office are done in a scientific, medically oriented way. And that's the way we're going to call it. And if we need outside help, We always can ask for the cases to be sent out. I am blessed by having the former medical examiner of Cook County working for us right now, Dr. Nancy Jones.
Okay.
Okay, she was involved in Darren's case. She's involved in another case. And anything I've done, I've gotten a second, third, fourth, fifth, or 10th opinion. For instance, Darren's case, I talked to pathologists in California.
Okay.
I talked to the chief medical the chief ME in Milwaukee, who had a similar case, almost mirror image of Darren. Okay, except he wasn't restrained by the officers. It was a young man who they suspected was suspected of burglary. He ran. He didn't get away, and they didn't hit him. They handcuffed him. But what they didn't know is he had the same disease as Darren.
Oh.
He had trait.
Okay.
So they put him in the back seat, and because of the running and the stress, again, remember, sickle cell trait, you stress that body, the organs are only working at about 50% of their capability. Now you're reducing it. They put him in the back seat of the car. They had a film on because they have him now in the back, and all of a sudden he started developing the acute respiratory distress syndrome that sickle cells happen. What happens is the sickle cells are sticky. So when they're pumping the blood faster, they start sticking to the walls of the arteries, and so you don't get good flow. You're not getting enough oxygen. He can't breathe. He's begging the cops, please, I can't breathe. I need medical help. They ignored him.
Okay.
Okay? That is a homicide.
Okay.
Somebody's asking you to help them. You're showing signs and symptoms. You chose to ignore it. That's not an accident. The original pathologist called it natural. But then the news reporter got hold of the film within the police officer's car.
Okay.
When the medical examiner's office saw that, they quickly changed it to homicide. That's a quality medical examiner. He said, aha, it looks natural. I did not have this film. These law enforcement officers should have stopped the car and helped him. He wasn't resisting. He was begging for help. That's a homicide.
Now, how many cases in this country? It happened in Milwaukee. It happened in North Chicago. How many other cases? Without the evidence of the camera in the car.
Yes, I agree with you. Gosh only knows. I mean, it's you can only postulate. I mean, just getting back to Trayvon, they said that Mr. Zimmerman was standing his ground.
Okay.
Okay, that was the law. Yet, in the same county, a few months later, or maybe before, I can't remember, but around the time of the trial, there was a black woman with 3 kids who had an abusive husband.
Okay.
He came in, she was scared, she took her gun, shot in the air. Boom, boom. Did shoot at him. She got 20 years in prison. Where's the justice?
It wasn't, they didn't use standing your ground there.
Yeah. Is it because of the color of her skin? I don't know. Why is Mr. Zimmerman gets to shoot somebody and get off? This woman fires a warning shot and is now spending 20 years in prison, and her kids were somebody else. Same county in Florida. It's very suspicious. Very suspicious.
In that case, is there retrial?
Let's hope so.
Ben, I think
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. That it gets appealed.
They're trying to get a retrial.
Gets appealed. Remember, she did not shoot him. She shot in the air. Back off from me and my kids. And it was her husband too.
Yeah,
okay.
Right.
So
another effective a coroner should have is communication, and you're showing a great deal of being an effective communicator. So that's one of the
old joke is, as I said before the show, I was vaccinated with a phonograph needle. Now, half the population probably doesn't know what a phonograph needle is. I can't take credit for that joke. That actually comes from Groucho Marx, which probably 90% of the people out there don't know. Okay, but yes, you have to be able to communicate to work with staff and to work with the public. Okay, don't forget, delivering the news that we have to deliver is very, very difficult. And we have to be very careful in doing it. There are situations where, you know, the public might think, oh, why didn't I get a response from you? Okay, without going into detail of the case, there was a case recently, and the family was upset that I hadn't contacted them about their loved one's death, but I couldn't, because I couldn't identify the person. He had been out he was exposed to the environment for a long time, and decomposition occurred where we couldn't do fingerprint analysis. So we had to do DNA analysis. And until we had that result, I didn't know who it was. I suspected who it was. Law enforcement gave me information about who it was, but we couldn't definitively do it. So I couldn't tell the family, and they were concerned that I should have reported it to them, but I felt I had to wait until I had definitive findings.
Dr. Rudd, I'll have to allow you a sufficient time. Probably won't be sufficient. Now we come to the end of the program.
Are you kidding? Really?
Right, about 10 minutes there. The Kalinowski case.
Kalinowski case.
Kalinowski, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that is a very tough case, and I'll try to talk as clear and as quick as I can.
Okay.
It was another case I was asked to review, and that was a difficult case to review because I read the trial transcripts.
Okay.
Okay. Darren had none, the Hannah case.
Okay.
So I read them for 4 months, and they're tough to read because, as you know, as a prosecutor or defense attorney starts something, there's a lot of stuff that before you get to the meat of the matter.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
So I read it for 4 months, and I reviewed the slides on the case, on the Kingen case, and I was shocked, Dr. Brooks, that the findings were nowhere near to what they said they were.
Okay.
It was listed as an acute event, and it was a chronic event. Okay? So in other words, the child had a prior injury, but it was interpreted as an immediate injury. And therefore, prosecution and law enforcement went to the individual that was most close to the child's death at the time and assumed that that individual had committed the act. They were working on wrong pathologic findings. So this is what I did. I was very concerned. I thought, my God, what are we going to do? I'm a coroner, so I can't. I can change the manner of death, but it still may be a homicide, but it's old injury. So, luckily, I had Dr. Jones working for us. I gave her the case, but first, I took the original slides, recut them and stained them, went back to the tissue that's in the bucket that we could do more slides and analysis, made new ones.
Okay.
Took a consultant for the defense, Dr. Teese's slides, reviewed hers. So I read 4 sets of slides. They all show the same thing. I presented them to Dr. Jones. She called me back and said, definitively, this has been misdiagnosed. There's a chronic injury. So now what do we do? I presented the findings of Dr. Jones. I had them delivered to the state's attorney. And I believe I gave him a letter saying, you know, what we did. And nothing occurred after that. So I thought, well, what can we do? What can we do in terms of justice? I brought in the original pathologist who made the mistake. But before doing that, I sent him Dr. Jones's report. And this pathologist was Dr. Choi. He read her report, called me up and said he'd gladly come in and review the slides with me. He came in, reviewed, we discussed them. He seemed to agree that I was right, but I didn't ask him to do anything. I wanted him to go home and think about it. I did not want to pressure him. I didn't want to do a quid pro quo. I didn't want to say, you know, you have to, just think about it. I waited a couple weeks, and I think I sent him a letter. And I said, could you give me your impression? Do you think I'm right? He sent me a letter back saying yes, you're right. I made a mistake.
Wow.
Now, that's the consummate professional.
Okay.
Yes, he made a mistake, but he admitted he made a mistake, and he signed an affidavit saying he made a mistake.
Wow.
And so we now have Dr. Jones' report. We have the affidavit from the original pathologist saying he made a mistake. And now we're waiting to see if law enforcement wants to do anything in terms of the state's attorney's office, or we have to wait for the appellate court ruling. My personal opinion is I think we have a wrongful conviction committee set up in the state's attorney's office. Why not allow them to review it? We're told, no, they're not going to present it, and I don't understand why. Okay.
It appears, though, that the state's attorney, when he ran for office, stated that he would look at wrongful convictions.
Correct.
And he started out, he set up a committee. Matter of fact, he has two committees set up.
That's correct.
Yeah,
that's correct. One is a citizen. I think it's wrongful conviction committees, or whatever you want to review committees. One has to do with mostly law enforcement, but then there's another one that's mostly from the community.
Right.
Something like that.
Right.
And I think there's a total of 15 members or something like that. The real question is, how do they operate? We can't find out. Okay, we don't know how they operate. Do they meet frequently? Do they analyze cases? Is the public allowed to know of their analysis? The benefit of this committee, I have to give the state's attorney's office credit, is that it's truly independent and it's not binding.
Yeah,
now, a lot of people think, well, that's bad, it's not binding. No, that's actually good. Okay, because it'll be neutral. In other words, the state's attorney should have no fear to turn it over to them because he does not have to follow their advice.
Right,
so what's the harm?
Just advisory.
What's the harm of turning it over? Maybe they'll find something you don't see, and then you may willfully want to change the decision on whether or not to reanalyze it. If it's non-binding, what's your worry?
It appears that it'll show good faith on the
Correct.
state's attorney's office to handle this Kalinowski case. That'd be, boy, he would get a great admired by the county to do this. So, you know what, I've talked with the state's attorney, and he's willing to be on the program. So in the near future, I know he's been busy, you know, the past few months, but he's willing to be on the program. So I'm going to ask him about this. Matter of fact, I'll tell him ahead of time. I will ask him about it to see why he will not reopen this case.
And to ask him how the committee functions.
Okay, the two committees.
I'll give you some questions. I'm interested too. So, you know, it'd be great. I would look forward to listening to that show.
Okay, I can't end the program without asking you, Dr. Rudd, what do you do in your leisure time activities?
I have my own show. I used to have a weekly program with a forensic pathologist in California.
Okay.
And it revolved, we got started 1 week after 9/11. So we were just going to do a music show, you know, a collage of everything, jazz, pop, folk, classical. But it started 1 week after 9/11, so we made it more of a history show with music. So we discussed the political situation that was going on. So we interviewed everybody. We started interviews. We did Studs Terkel. We did Joan Baez. We did Pete Seeger. Okay. We did various physicians in the community. Just a collage of interviews, but mostly we've drifted now strictly to music because we were weekly, and we started in 2001.
Okay.
And it was very difficult to do weekly, but I was managing to do it. Then we did it monthly, And then finally, we did a quarterly. So we're doing a quarterly show, but that's my interest. Other than
Fantastic.
that, if I had to do it over, I'd be a DJ. I love music.
Okay.
That's my hobby.
What type of music you?
Mostly classical. However, I like the classic rock. Okay, and I love Mahalia Jackson. I have tons of Mahalia Jackson, and what's the gal? Oh, the blues singer. It starts with a B. Bess. I can't remember right now. I'm drawing a blank in my old age. I like the classic blues. I love Mahalia Jackson is just the consummate gospel singer. We actually did several interviews of shows that Stud Sterkel did with her. We do certain ethnic groups. We've done Israeli music, we've done Pakistani music, but we've had people who know about it come on the show, so they know what to play. So I think music is the soul in notes. Okay, there's no such thing as bad music. There's nothing but good music.
I remember and I might end the show with this, in music appreciation that I had back in grade school. And the instructor asked the young man, what are the 3 B's in music? Of course, we know it as Beethoven, Bach, and Brahms, right? So he held up his hand. He said, bebop, boogie, and blues. So I had to get that, and that actually happened. You know. Okay, you had mentioned that you come from a environment too when you were growing up that was that I don't know whether you like to relate it.
My grandfather was a tavern owner.
Okay.
But in Prohibition, he was also a bootlegger.
Oh,
okay.
We might end it with this. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with Dr. Rudd. He's the Lake County coroner. And this has been an evening with the Lake County coroner. We know all about the Lake Coroner's office, and if we need more, there's a website you can contact, or you can call the Lake County coroner's office and get more information about. I'm sure that he will come out and available for speaking groups and so forth. They get the information out, promulgate, as we say in the Navy, information out about the Lake County coroner's office. This has been Community Forum. My name is Dr. Waddell Brooks Sr., your host.